20th, believe it or not, of 2022, December 2022. I'm your host tonight, Dana Durnford. I hope you're having a good day. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. And my phone number, 709 is on your screen, 589-4406. We got a poll for everybody tonight, if you're interested in polls. Should nuclear scientists be held accountable for never trying to stop Fukushima's radioactive fallout? We got 8 people on our show, 10 people. Censorship, there's obviously 11 people here. And when you're doing a show for a decade and all you can get is 8 people, there's 2 problems maybe. One, you're terribly bad at doing it, or 2, there's a lobbying group that don't want you to be heard. In our case, it is right there, the International Atomic Energy Agency have sent this memos out to the medias worldwide, and for 80 years, the media has taken great joy and pleasure in destroying your ability to rationalize. The industry has absolutely nobody in the nuclear industry that the world says, hey, that's a pretty cool guy. There's nobody, because there's nobody that's palatable in that industry. Ken Balcom died. He worked for the government for many years, but even after, he continued to champion for killer whales. And so the killer whales have lost probably their best advocate on the entire planet. Because, like, your government is not going to do something good. That's why people like Ken had to exist after. And the cause was prostate cancer, and he's up in the West Coast in Washington area, which was hammered by Fukushima, so you never know. Anyway, it's always a sad day when you lose somebody that gives a shit about the world. These are pictures from yesterday of Reactor 1 with all the holes in it. I'm still trying to comprehend why there's all kinds of holes inside of that nuclear power plant. It's a massive plant that's 150 feet wide. So it's bigger than your bathroom wide for sure. And there's a picture we all are suffering from. Radiation fallout contaminated every species on the planet. Nuclear power has one last chance to flourish in the United States. We've seen a few of these headlines in the last, since Conference of Parties 27. The make or break moment for the atomic energy. First off, last year there was 291.5 gigawatts came online of energy. 291.1 gigawatts was renewables. 0.4 gigawatts was nuclear. I would say that the industry is a flop. And then the year before it was the same thing. It was 260 gigawatts renewable and a little over half a gigawatt of nuclear. So 260 gigawatts of renewables, which was equal to 300 nuclear power plants in 2022 of renewable energies coming online in 12 months. And then in the next 12 months was 291.5 gigawatts. Most of that, not 291.5 basically was renewables. And so that was equal to 550 gigawatts came online, which is equal to 633 nuclear power plants coming online in less than 2 years. Versus nuclear was equal to almost a gigawatt. So 550 gigawatts of renewables and a gigawatt of nuclear in a 24-month period means nuclear, let's face it. Now, Watts-Bar took 43 years to get number 2 reactor up and running. 43 years. And who knows how many billions over budget. Really, right? Who knows how many billions over budget. They knew in the 50s, in the 40s actually, but in the early 50s, that when you blew up nuclear bombs, for instance, in the ocean, the sulfur, it separated and it formed a structure which is kind of like a buckyball and kind of like a soccer ball, but it was able to ingest hot particles, which is pretty well everything, and became supercharged, and they were very mobile, and they weren't solutable per se in water. They were liberated back into the environment. So very scary. Now, these sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs is what they were basically classified as. Just one of them in a bird or an insect or an animal or a human would cause incredible harm, and there's 1,800 illnesses, right? These children know a little tiny bit about it. The nuclear industry held a fake science club for children, and then they fed them radioactive diets. That's your typical nuclear scientist. Because they love you so much and your children. They actually see your children as rats and guinea pigs. That's the nuclear industry, I kid you not. Niigata Prefecture, which was brutal radioactive fallout in Fukushima Prefecture, was hit by a record 24-hour snowfall. So when that melts, it washes a shitload of radiation into the ocean, and radiation is always hemorrhaging out. And so this is radioactive snowfall on top of that, because it's picking up the radiation. A record snowfalls for 24-hour periods. 110 centimeters of snow in 24 hours. That's craziness. Scared the shit out of me. Sorry. That was supposed to be a picture, not a video. There's people all over the place, the world right now, just jumped worse than I did. Particularly if you had headphones on. I'll keep an eye out for here on out for the rest of the show, just in case I've done that again. The polar bear is the nuclear industry. The person trying to evade it is every human and every species on the planet. And guess who's going to win? Guess who's going to win that one? It ain't Buddy. It ain't the planet. Palestine owner, which is Holtec, which is Chris Singh, says is still hoping to restart a shuttered nuclear plant. So they didn't own the plant before it shut down. They bought it and put a bid in on it. So there's money available for decommissioning. Now what they do is they have these companies, these vultures, they'll bid on it, And the lowest bid basically will get the decommission. And so they're going to release absurd amount of radiation into the environment because they've got to make profit. And there's no incentive to be... there's no checks and balances either. And this reactor's closed down. They just got denied money, but now they're going to try again to reopen this old and decrepit plant. And what that means is the plant is very vulnerable from neutron bombardment, has weakened all the metal in the cement on a whole different scale that most people can comprehend. These are pressurized reactors at 1,000, 2,000 psi. So this is not something you want to be adding pressure to. And now that it's shut down finally, that would be the best thing to do. But they're persistent. That's the nuclear industry. Brookfield bought Westinghouse recently. Go nuclear and go large. So Brookfield Renewables, but they run nuclear. It's quite the scam, isn't it? And the money that they're using for it was investment money. So when people put money into the investment organizations, corporations, they don't get a say in what, because they can invest in the military, and they usually do, military-industrial complexes, or the nuclear, which is basically a military-industrial complex. This is a Canadian company, so I apologize, because I'm from Canada. The recent buyout of Westinghouse comes as the world looks set to experience a revival of nuclear power. But the world is not looking set to experience a revival of nuclear power. Like the people, the manpower doesn't exist anymore, the knowledge to build these things. Russia and France is still, and South Korea are tooling with it, but everything is decades behind schedule. And like the one in Finland, the EDFs, France's EDFs, which is the French government, by the way, and known as Electronic de France, the France, they're 50 billion or something in the hole because they got so many plants offline. So they didn't buy it. Only a company that wasn't spending its own money bought it. One day, son, all of this nuclear waste will be yours, and you can pass it on for thousands and thousands of generations, because you can't get what you dumped into the environment back. Here's another one. Nuclear power is on the cusp of a $1 trillion resurgence. They want you to buy stocks. That's what they're up to. Don't fall for it, for goodness sakes. Stocks have flatlined since Fukushima. There's some artificial inflation along the way, and tricked people into buying stocks. They all got robbed within 2 weeks. They lost their entire investment and sold it for probably 30% of what they put in. Worldwide efforts. That tells you how much power this industry actually got. I began to recognize the critical role of nuclear power. Well, it's like you can't compete. There's 550 gigawatts in the last 24 months. 549 of it was renewables. 1 gigawatt was nuclear. There is no renaissance. There's a panic. The industry is panicking. Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. These butchers. That was Shakespeare. A little relevant again. Way to go, Shakespeare. Terror Power. We covered this a couple of days ago when during another story where we were talking about the fuel. They're all dependent upon 16% enriched mixed oxide fuel, and they don't have any. They don't have anywhere in Britain or North America to produce it on top of that. And they put, like idiots, thank goodness, they put embargoes and sanctions against Russia, and they have no other way of supplying it. But there is no renaissance. Terror Power is supposed to be Bill Gates Bill Gates has never been there. He's never walked there. He's never flown over it, for God's sakes. He never even looked in the same direction. It's a complete fable. The rules are so stringent in the concept of they're not allowed to poison you. That's a new concept in the nuclear industry for some reason. But that's the rules. If you don't get them then you can't stop them after. Because it's not illegal to poison you. But the rule says you got to contain the radiation. And they're like, well, we can't build something that's going to contain the radiation. This is madness. That's why we surround them with farms. And I'm not joking, sadly. You hear me? I'm not joking. This is the nuclear industry. That's it right there. That's absolutely perfect depiction of the nuclear industry. And that's the legacy of every nuclear project worldwide, by the way. The false promise of nuclear fusion. It's a criminal promise. The hoodwinking promise. The dishonest and disingenuous promise. And they always got these cute pictures, right? You can put 2 million of them on the head of a needle, but you can't see them. It only takes one to make you sick in increments for the rest of your life. The media went wild on December the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and today also the 20th. And what happened was stocks went up for this industry that don't have a product. Major Christmas for the fake fusion. So normally I try to cover just all the propaganda. Sometimes it's too much for me. He said it reminds me of a promise made in 1954 by Louis Strauss. Piece of shit that he is. The then chair of the disgusting U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. Strauss pledged that the atomic energy would someday create electricity. We need drum rolls or something. Too cheap to meter. Here's an interesting picture. Here's the before, and here's the after. It's not quite perfect angles from the first one to the second one, but it's not bad. And stripped the roads and the dirts and the sidewalk. The tsunami did. And we could pop in here. Where you to, little buddy? Little D. Hello, little D. Hello, everybody. This is reactor 4. Look at the damage to that. I'll show you a better picture in a minute. Oh, what's the rush, Dan? Show it now. My finger's getting weak. Oh, I can't hold it anymore. So there's reactor 4. Behind it is the common spent fuel pool. There's the Medusa, reactor 3. There's another Medusa, reactor 2, and reactor 1. So you got reactor 1, reactor 2, reactor 3, reactor 4. And the common spent fuel pools is not as tall as the reactors. So guess what happened there? They covered it up. And so you can see all the damage down on in front of it. When are you going to come up with mind control so I can just move myself around by using my head? Look at all the carnage there and around these reactors. And reactor 4, incredible carnage. Unbelievable damage we're talking about. Versus the disgusting thing that it was before. Oh yes, so talk starts on raising payouts for the victims of the nuclear disaster. They had revised the law. This is the exact same picture since 2013. The tanks were built to trick you and manipulate you and deceive you into thinking that everything was contained in the tanks. Not you, the people that are watching this, because you're not that gullible, but to the ones who don't know any better, never read a book, or you know what I mean, right? There's a lot of people out there who have no concept, and so we have a responsibility to try to protect those who are not aware. A government committee on December 20th started discussions on increasing the amount of damage paid for the mental stress of victims, not to being poisoned on top of it. But, obviously, if you got to leave your home and your pets behind to starve to death, there's going to be a lot of serious mental stress. There was a tsunami and a massive earthquake at the same time. But a dispute reconciliation committee for nuclear damage compensation. It's the first since 2013, the first time they revised it. So for those who live in the designated difficult to return zone, will receive roughly 7 million yen, which is 72,000 Canadian dollars, or $6 American dollars. It's a joke, by the way. Not that big of a joke, but it's a joke. The committee decided people who lived in areas later designated as restricted residency zones, or zones preparing for lifting of evacuation orders. This industry is so gobblish. It's so gobblish. Every day you expect a news say, another nuclear scientist have killed their entire family in a rage because their coffee was cold. Will also be eligible for damage of 2.5 million yen, which is 26,000 Canadians, which is nothing when you take what they lost and what the fact they were poisoned. They should get a quart of blood from everybody in the executive offices of the IAEA and TEPCO too. At the same time, Japan expands scope of nuclear compensation for mental damage and refuses to acknowledge radiation damage. And this was interesting because at the bottom of it, this was the same story but on another site, a little bit different, which is really unusual, by the way. They decided to step up their game a little bit, and they got the picture of Reactor 3. Now, it's a very small picture. I had to zoom in, but doesn't that look like there's somebody stood up right there? Now, this is a complete empty building. This is Reactor 3. This was actually, they built the structures 170 feet tall. In order, because the original structure, where you playing hide and go seek, peekaboo. Peekaboo. Dana's playing peekaboo. I need pewter. Okay, my apologies. So it does, I've seen a lot of pictures, but in that picture, it kind of looked like somebody was working there. Caught me off guard when I seen the picture. I think that was on purpose, because I've never seen that in the other pictures of this disease factory. Remember, Reactor 3 is over there. There is no Reactor 3. They built that structure on top of it, built it off-site, brought it there, and assembled it with cranes. Nobody's going in there. You can't go in there, inside of that structure, let alone there, or even close to there. That's a lethal dose. It's Reactor 3. It's a mixed oxide fuel meltdown in Japan. I think we had a poll tonight, didn't we? Hello, everybody. Hi, Stephen Young. And Dana Nasana and Albert. Zombies. Should nuclear scientists, aka scumbags, be held accountable for never trying to stop the Fukushima radioactive fallout? Because they've never actually went there. You can't get them within 100 kilometers of the place. No nuclear scientists, no nuclear academics. Only like fake ones are claiming to be there. We got a few of them over the years. We're getting there. Looks like we got a call. Hold the hotlines. Hello, James. Hang on there. I got to do my usual voodoo to get everything to work. Okay. Looks good, James. This is James Lucid, folks, from your comments section over there. Hi, James.
I just been having a hard day, I just wanted to call in because it's the only thing that makes me feel better. So
that's awesome. Go ahead, James.
Trying to get through this. I mean, it just feels like I had some discussions with people recently about, hey, do you know that a nuclear energy plant requires input power? It needs external power. They can't operate on their own power. It used these strange looks from people, and it just made me. It kind of reminded me of
sad.
Maybe we're still in the dark ages. Maybe the dark ages never really came to light. Because here we are. Just recently, it seems like overnight that hydrogen fuel cells have now become commercially available. And it's something like that makes you think, how come they didn't how come they couldn't discover this back in the 1800s? Something so simple. And yet, here we are, they're just now coming out to be where we're like, well, now and here, Elon, he was quoted by saying before the human came out, all this stuff, hydrogen production is so expensive, takes a lot of energy. It's like, what are you talking about? Hydrogen's the most common element there is.
Yep.
It's just a way of extracting it. You just got to think about things. And if you, of all people, are going to make that comment, it's just crazy. It's just been so crazy recently. Even just the other day, I was on this JFK stream, and in the comment description, I wrote something, oh yeah, none of the people back then could ever dream the problems that Fukushima put on us today.
No kidding.
Back then would ever imagine. And some smart ass gets on he's like, I'm a nuclear engineer, and Fukushima didn't melt the primary fuel. I'm like sitting here thinking about this. I'm like, I'm not going to let this go.
Good.
I'm not going to let this go.
Thank goodness.
I'm like, how does it feel to be in opposition of Einstein? You son of a bitch,
Yeah.
Because that's what it is, right? I mean, you think Einstein would be for that? Of course not.
No way.
I mean,
nobody in their right. I'll cut you off for a second.
No.
Yeah, the great thinkers of our time would have vehemently, and did, some of them vehemently come out in opposition to the nuclear industry once they understood the emissions side of it. I mean, that was really slick. They hid that away. Go ahead, James.
But it's crazy because, I feel like everything I've learned is through, you and Kevin combined, right? But everything before that, I've been lied to. I've been lied.
Oh, man.
So long about, and it feels so horrible when the people that lie to you about this stuff.
There's supposed to be people you can look up to.
People are disgusting.
They put them on a pedestal. They want people to gravitate towards them, and they act the part, right? They will act that part. They went to university to get an education so that they can tell that lie and nobody can oppose them. And that's how it was up until the internet age, right?
It really is that. And, it's incredible to me to think that. I don't know how much YouTube gets paid to for you to be censored on the most important platform is existing in our time right now. Here we are. Everyone's confused about the variants of this and that. Salmon are gone, snow crab are gone. No one can connect it all. Yet
It's
right
easy.
in front of your face. What do you think's going to happen? This is it. The Earth doesn't know what to do with a meltdown. It doesn't know what this stuff is. It can't heal it.
No.
What do you think's going to happen? This is going to get worse and worse and worse. And we need the best minds on this problem.
Yeah.
And no one wants to talk about it. Just cover it up, get the next booster, whatever. It's going to be a better day. Tomorrow, if we just all have positive things and we just figure out where our pronouns are, everything will be fine. And it's just
grammar's
programming we're out there, but
grammar's a weapon.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's let me reinforce the point though. I mean, Earth doesn't know everything with replicating cells is under siege, and that's why when James says Earth doesn't know what to do with it, he's right on. Nail is right on the head, folks. This we have to fight back. We got no choice. This is not a game. This is the biggest weapon against all species, and it was snuck up on us, and we're way down the rabbit hole. We need to make a stand, and James is making a stand, recognizing the urgency of it, and that's all we need to do. And then we come up with solutions as a society. Go ahead, James, if you got. I probably threw you off.
No, it's not a game. No, it's not a game, and thank you. No, I feel better now. So that's all I had. That's all
I feel better too. Thank you, James. Good stuff, my friend.
All right. Well,
yeah. Okay. God bless, my friend. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a disturbing point that he makes, isn't it? The Earth cannot defend itself against the radioactive fallout, and if we don't recognize that, and we don't treat it appropriately, and it's kind of the frustration that I got in my poll tonight. Should nuclear scientists be held accountable for never, ever trying to stop radioactive fallout from any of the 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, or any of the cast worldwide everything is vented into the environment and the drums and everything else. Everything that the ship to whip is vented into the environment on the highways and the farmers' fields and the communities that it passes through. The emissions, most people, you can't perceive it. You could with some basic education, right? The education was that it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in sunshine. The education was complete and utter deception, and it works. The average person is like, well, no, it's like a banana though. It's like flying on an airplane. It's okay. And years ago, before Fukushima, I had a friend of mine, her uncle was a professor at MIT University. And she was married to a good friend of mine, but we were all friends. And she was talking to him one day, and because I talk about nuclear long before Fukushima, she had asked him how harmless was Chernobyl. And he told her it was like a banana and sleeping next to somebody and like walking in sunshine. And that's basically, you couldn't convince her otherwise, because he was a professor at MIT and she couldn't conceive that he would lie to her, because he's her uncle, she's his niece, but he could not tell the truth to her. He had to lie to her because the truth is horrible, see? And so if he tells the truth, then he can't look himself in the mirror for a long time after. More nuclear power is what both parties want. This was a story by Matthew I can't pronounce his last name. Sack of shit, it looks like to me, from Bloomberg. And he spent the whole story trying to convince people that nuclear was harmless. Woo. Usually they come in twos. Did I get lucky and get one? The Inflation Reduction Act featured a 15-fold increase in funding for low-enriched uranium. 15-fold increase. It makes nuclear power eligible for clean energy tax credits, which is absurd, and appropriated $150 million for the Idaho project and related activities. The Idaho National Laboratory to develop a new generation of small fission reactors that can solve the cost problem that plague traditional reactors. There's a range of companies exploring small reactor technologies, and this guy done everything they could to convince the viewers that small modular reactors in nuclear had any kind of a redeeming quality whatsoever. And what he is, he's a special kind of idiot. He said there are health risks associated with blackouts and energy poverty. So if you don't get nuclear, that just as the risk of radiation, and so there are health risks associated with blackouts. You can't compare radioactive fallout with random blackouts or so-called energy poverty. And that's why I say he's a special kind of an idiot. This guy here. This is his favorite quote, I think. Sometimes when I'm thinking something bad about someone, I immediately think of something else just in case they can hear my thoughts. That's his favorite quote, apparently. And he got an education, and now it's acceptable to go out and lie to people to get his paycheck. Yay, I'm a spineless academic journalist. Nuclear power is not the answer. Nuclear power is the problem. North Korea fired a ballistic missile to the sea off the East Coast. How many did America fire in India and Pakistan and everybody else? India took it to a whole different level. Nobody, they're testing another same missile. North Korea's doing, oh my God, North Korea is setting off a missile. Oh, this is great. Look at India. They finally can test their nuclear capable missiles. Pakistan replied, a responsible nuclear state defense after the atomic bomb threat. She threatened India with nuclear weapons. She issued an atomic bomb warning to India, and the next day claimed that Pakistan is a responsible nuclear state. Did you know that Reactor 3 had 4 decades of reactor cores stored somewhere else? No. In the bottom of the building? No. At the top of the building in the worst possible spot? Yeah. Did it all melt down and get evaporated into the environment and now it's killing all the species? Yeah. You're pretty clever today there. I don't blame you if you're shocked the United States wielded a nuclear spacecraft engine as far as back as the 60s. It had no containment. So when they fired up the nuclear propellant, it hemorrhaged radiation into the environment with no containment. Which is, most of the reactors, original reactors, had no containment. It's like a nuclear bomb going off every 4 minutes in radiation emissions. And so like the Idaho National Laboratories, Sandina National Laboratories, all the national laboratories have meltdowns. Santa Susana have meltdowns of reactors, and the biggest problem was it didn't have any containment. Not seeing a pattern there anywhere, are you, in the nuclear industry? No, it all looks, don't know why it melted down. And the whole story about the nuclear rocket, they're going to do nuclear cars, powered planes, nuclear trains. And thank goodness the nuclear industry is so incompetent, they never created anything after huge, massive releases. Underground nuclear waste repository begins filling new disposal area. Workers at the nation's only underground, which was originally supposed to be a pilot project, not a repository. And they said, no, we'll take a bit more. Keep it coming. Nobody's looking. Keep it coming. 9, 10, 11 years later, and a meltdown in 2014, they blamed on a truck fire and spent $6 billion cleaning up a truck fire, because that makes a lot of sense. So now they got another area at the underground facility in southern Mexico. They probably had another meltdown, just didn't want to say anything. Officials. Whenever I see the word officials, I literally get cold chills, like, ugh. You imagine what kind of creature they actually are? The Waste Isolation Pilot Project, not pilot plant, made the announcement late last month saying the first containers of waste to be entombed in the new area came from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which was a legacy weapons site. I want you to believe it's just contaminated hammers and contaminated shoes and stuff like this, paper towels. It doesn't work that way. This industry is way too evil to go through all this effort for lab coats, rubber gloves, tools, and debris, because they changed the rules so they're allowed to just put this in cement and store it anywhere. So they're half a mile underground. They're not a half mile underground to bury lab coats and rubber gloves. No, it's an industry of disgusting people. Each room measures 33 feet wide, 16 feet high, and runs the length of a football field. So 300 feet. Carved out of ancient salt formation, half a mile deep. Received his first shipment actually in 1999. Not 12 years or 9 years, but 22 years ago. The shifting salt will destroy the containment. And see, the thing about nuclear high-level waste, if you put it a half mile under the ground and you entomb it in sarcophagus in steel 5 feet thick, 10 feet thick, and it's surrounded by whatever fake material you want to use, name it. It doesn't matter. The chain reaction doesn't need oxygen, and it'll burn at over 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And if water comes into that, it'll split the earth. And all of these repositories, that's what's going to happen to it eventually in 100, 200, 300 years. Not 3,000, not 30,000, not 300,000, not 3 million, but in 100 or 200 years. So, again, Reactor 4, let's bring up the poll for a quick flash. Should the nuclear scientists be held accountable for never going to Fukushima, never trying to stop it, never trying to warn the population, never trying to come up with technology? And what do we got on this subject? We got 18 viewers. It just doesn't seem possible after a decade. Such a coward industry, right? They got no one to pick on is the problem. So I because I'm doing 2-hour shows 5 days a week, I got a big fat bullseye for censorship all over me. You got nobody to pick on. You got 1,000 corporations, public relation firms for nuclear industry, all trying to get bonuses for Christmas, but they got no one to beat up. To say, look what we done to this guy. So all of them got competing software attacking me with lobbyists directly in YouTube land. Because they got 10,000 lobbyists, right? Military, pharmaceutical, GMO, probably 1,000 nuclear tarts in there, but they got no one to censor. Most of the planet is very compliant, very, very politically correct, useful idiots. Just the people that show up here, the majority of them are honest like yourselves, good people that are getting educated and trying to have a conversation, an actual conversation, not a fake conversation, but an actual conversation. And we're punished, absolutely despised. We're feared and scorned because we want to have a conversation. We're criminals. So there's reactor, the building right behind my thumb there is 190 feet tall. So how tall is this? They built this structure off-site to assemble it there just to hoodwink you. Because they love you so much. They love you so much. The fuel pools are at the top of the building, so is the reactor core. There is no top to the building. That's the original footage within a couple of days of the detonation. Yep. Nuclear engineers at Virginia Tech excited for safety research. So am I. If they ever done something safety, I'd be out of a job. Well, it's not a job. This is a calling, I guess. These are credible, disgusting people. Like, they're well aware of the propaganda. You can't get into the university without the propaganda. And once you get educated, get your education and degree, you're going to work for an industry where you have to regurgitate propaganda. These are schools of mass destruction. Virginia Tech is a school of mass destruction. It was instrumental in all kinds of, apologizing for Fukushima, for instance. If you go look at any university's archives, and you go back to Fukushima topic, and you watch their presentations, you're going to be thrown up because of the propaganda. A Virginia Tech professor, so right away, he's got zero credibility. He's a professor, for God's sakes. From all these years, one thing we learned about a professor is they're the first one to cut your throat. With a grant of $500,000 from the federal nuclear non-regulatory agencies. I'm not going to put you through it. It's too much for me. If it's too much for me, it's probably too much for you. There's one of the professors there. Now, these are alleged journalists, and they're all pretending to be above the fuel pool, because where the two, they're actually physically above the fuel pool. Fuel pools are at the top of the building, of that building over there. Do you see them? You see the hole there? A lot of the apologists, right, will try to claim the hole is the fuel pool. That's the actual elevator shaft. So there's an elevator shaft over here, and they lower down cast, and it sits on the back of a pickup truck. The pools are at the top of this 190-foot tall, 150-foot wide building. So the building over there is 150 feet wide. Okay, so let's say this is your property. You come home, the building's missing, and all that's left is this, whatever you want to call this stump. Say this wasn't a nuclear reactor. This was just a normal building. And when you live at the top 19th story of the building, 190 feet up in the air, when you came home and you seen this, would you say, well, they'll get it repaired, we can move in there in a couple of days or a couple of years? No. You would say the building's completely gone. There's nothing functional ever. There's nothing you can reuse in the building. And so these journalists, in 2013 no less, are pretending it looks like that, instead of what it really looks like is that. And if that doesn't worry you, you need to go back and start the video over. Obviously you got here and you don't know much about the topic. We'll get you up to speed, don't worry about it. TEPCO denies radioactive water discharge claim. TEPCO denies that there's any humans working at TEPCO. This is absurdness. There's so many ways, so many things that everybody should be aware of about this subject. I'll give you the most important one. And we won't hear this story anywhere else, which is horrifying. Which is absolutely horrifying. I'll explain it to you. So there was 3 systems. The Surrey system, which was allegedly going to filter out cesium-137, which is the biggest part of the lie, by the way. But the Alpha system, Areva system, 2014 in August, over 3 years later, has been remained unused and kept out of operation. The ALP system has yet to function reliably. Well, it yet to function. Just 2014, you're talking about lethal doses by the liter. You're talking about lethal doses by the liter. You can't filter that out. You can't filter out this kind of radiation. It's 2 sieverts per liter. 2 liters is a lethal dose. You'll die within a week or two being around that for a short time. 100 million becquerels per cubic centimeter. So when you're measuring cubic centimeters, because you're afraid to say what the numbers really are, the bypass operation that they were going to bypass water from going through the site and picking up the radiation, carrying it into the ocean, flopped in 2014. In 2013, they admitted that they can't build a fence because there is no such thing as a fence. A fence. Remember, they built an ice wall instead of a real wall, which is absurdness times infinity. And everybody agrees that Fukushima is an apocalypse and that everything is out of control. The French says Japan has lost the country. The French should leave the country. Korea called them incompetent. Swiss embassy called them incompetent. The energy minister called them incompetent. The ambassador for the U.S., the Japanese ambassador, said this could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. Take heed to any warnings you're getting from that many well-placed entities. Please don't worry, says the man in the paper suit. And TEPCO claims they burned 7,000 paper suits a day because they can't produce the evidence, and they got incinerators, so all they got to do is say something. They can't prove it. They said 6,000 of them worked on the water every day, so the water never went into the ocean. So shut up, Dana's a fearmonger. These tanks were built to confuse you. And you see they got these containments around the tanks because they have so many earthquakes, they don't want the empty tanks to be shifting. And then the gig's up. These are empty tanks. The tanks are built to manipulate you. You have to break the grip that they got on you before you can see reality. So they want you to worry about what might happen. They don't want you to worry about what has already happened and never stopped happening. This is 19 days of radioactive fallout. Remember, an invisible plume covering the entire planet, pulsing energy every second, almost at the speed of light, almost at 186,000 miles per second, 300,000 kilometers per second, every second for millions of years, and every day you're adding more. But Fukushima was a pulse. It was a pulse that evaporated the entire planet. We got New York calling in. Hang on, New York. Are you calling in to go live?
Sure.
Okay, that sounds like a yes to me if I ever heard one.
But Dana, I'd like to wish you a happy Christmas.
Thank you. Happy Christmas yourself.
Oh, thank you very much.
You getting enough snow down there?
Actually, we're forecast for the weather to change on Friday. But it's supposed to be really nice tomorrow.
Sounds good.
It's probably going to be around 40 Fahrenheit.
Well, I'm certainly jealous. It ain't 40 Fahrenheit around here yet. It's terrible. Well, it's not too bad today, but it's windy and rain and more in the forecast apparently. Minuses tomorrow,
Right.
-5, -7. And we got a little lull type today. Go ahead, caller. Thank
But
you.
I just wanted to comment on James with the hydrogen. And the next time someone tells you about a hydrogen explosion,
Right.
ask them how the hydrogen was separated from the oxygen without a reaction.
At Fukushima.
Right. But the other thing I would like to mention is ammonia. But the infrastructure is complete, and if you separate the hydrogen from the nitrogen, you can put it through a fuel cell.
Okay.
So I would like people to look into that.
Oh, to put hydrogen can be separated. Yeah, no, I had read up on that a while back. I can't really remember the details, but...
But the infrastructure is already complete.
Oh, for hydrogen.
So, not for ammonia.
Oh, that's right, yeah. We covered that a while ago, actually,
Oh.
didn't we?
They can transport it, and they can distribute it very safely.
Yeah. I'm confused.
But the other thing I want,
Go ahead.
not you were confused.
I said, yeah, no, I was confused on why you called in, that's all.
I just wanted to wish you a happy Christmas.
Thank you.
But
I know they're working on hydrogen. This was because this was an attempt to make the nuclear industry relevant, right? And to switch over. The nuclear industry is they're very persistent in their propaganda, and so I was just trying to figure out what you were referring to with the hydrogen.
No, it's all been hidden from us because they've already known about this.
Yeah, hydrogen. There's plenty of hydrogen available, and there's better ways to do it. But they painted it recently over the last year. The nuclear industry did, as the nuclear industry's most redeeming quality was it could produce a lot of hydrogen, and they were going to call it carbon-free hydrogen. But to produce hydrogen is it's very resource energy intensive, typically, right? For most of the applications that I've seen over the years. And this was just another, whenever I always associated with the nuclear industry, looking to try to get some brownie points by claiming that me when it comes to hydrogen for the nuclear industry, that's all. Okay, my friend, thank you. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I just wanted to add that there's enough energy in a glass of water to power your entire house for 60 years. but
Right.
you have to know how to separate it safely.
Right, I've heard that, yeah. Yeah, no, I hope we come up with a solution, that's for sure. Thank you, caller. We appreciate it.
Well, all right, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, my friend. Have a great night. Thank you now.
Bye.
And hydrogen has some serious potential. You can actually buy, I think you can buy hydrogen cars right now. But nuclear should not be used for anything. It shouldn't exist is all I'm saying, right? And that there's enough hydrogen on the planet, obviously, to solve our problems. We already know we can produce the energy and engines that will work with it, right? We already have that technology. I thought we were talking about the hydrogen explosion, so I brought up a picture of it, which was obviously wrong. Russia state TV host says West will be reduced to ashes if the war is lost. The West will be reduced to ashes if the war is lost. Well, what do they think is going to happen to them? They really think no one's going to fire nuclear bombs back at them? Because the nuclear industry is happy to oblige them, right? To fire weapons back. The death cult that is the nuclear industry. And this is a state TV host, a Russian state TV host. This is a TV host in Russia saying the West will be reduced to ashes if they don't win the war. If they don't win the war. We got a caller from Oregon. Hello, Oregon. How are you tonight?
Hello, Mr. Diner. Yoshida Mashada, Tokyo Bureau, Chicago Division.
Didn't I tell you not to call me anymore, stalker?
Answer my call.
Because you're a stalker. He's a stalker, eh? This is Tokyo TEPCO stalker. This is TEPCO stalker with a new number. TEPCO stalker got a new number. Well, that was interesting. That was a little bit interesting. Why is he bothering me anyway? I only got 17 people watching my show. That's real time. We got 17 viewers. How do I become... why does the nuclear industry stalk me when we only got 17 viewers watching the show? I don't get it. Because there's probably 18 Dana, and they're just hiding one of them. Let's keep her going. We got lots of stuff to get through anyway. Our new nukes don't exist, and they won't save the climate, which is small modular reactors. Shh, we know that, but the climate stories are one chance to resuscitate the nuclear industry, which is 100% true, right? The nuclear industry, its entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and dishonesty and deception. Twitter suppressed a story that wasn't damaging. In other words, they suppressed lots of stories that were damaging, but they finally screwed up and suppressed the story that wasn't. You got any idea how evil that actually is? That scares me. Restart of 2 French nuclear power stations pushed back until summer. Restart of 2 French... Well, the France's reactors were all built at the same time. And they were built on the old models, and they had major flaws with neutron bombardment, would cause the embrittlement of all the infrastructure. 90% of the infrastructure on the entire site became embrittled from neutron bombardment, which meant everybody was getting irradiated. And, of course, they're always hemorrhaging radiation all day from the fuel pools worldwide, and which is just frightening what's really going on with that story. And all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms, which is total coincidence, I'm pretty sure. The French, of course, they still, they should reimburse or take care of everybody in the French Polynesian islands and in the Sahara Desert. And that they impoverished a country known as Niger, which is where they get their very rich uranium from, which is like 35% or something, from Niger. They caused a civil war for 60 years, impoverished the country, they armed the fractions on the borders. They currently have 3,000 soldiers stationed there, permanently since the 60s, so they can get cheap uranium for their reactors. And of course, France's La Hague, it has 2 reprocessing facilities. The La Hague in France has 500 security guards and has polluted the entire Arctic from its emissions from the mixed oxide fuel, which is the same fuel but only worse they need for their fabled unicorn small modular reactors. Nuclear history in New Mexico celebrated national stamp collection despite the impacts, which is unusual for them to put something like that at the end of a sentence in a major... This is Carlsbad. New Mexico, major media, had put a slur into the nuclear industry. And it's a dishonest reason why they got a stamp there, which is... and so they had put up a little slide for us. And I captured the slide. I'll put it on the big screen so we can all ooh and ah. I'm not going to read through this particular stuff. This is the Trinity test, 1945. This was the beginning of the end of all the species on the planet. These are balloons that they're using. Carried instruments to measure the radiation during the first 1/1000th of a second. In 1940s, they had this kind of capability. In late 1940s, their cameras were shooting almost 1 million frames a second. So when people look back, they kind of think of people as being pretty uneducated back in that area. They're completely wrong. The greatest thinkers, like, well, certainly Roosevelt, people like that. If you go back, the best way I like to explain to people is you go back 400 or 500 years, and you can just zip yourself back into these little the cities. The structure of the houses, the doors, the windows, the desks, the chairs, the kitchens were just... You would love to have a house that beautiful. The craftsmanship back those days was all handmade. It was fascinating. We've lost that tradition. But I mean, those houses will last for hundreds of years. Very sad pictures when I see this kind of stuff, because the radioactive fallout was worldwide, right? And the irony is not lost on me. This was the house where they assembled the bomb. I don't understand what the hell that was all about. The plutonium device, which was the one they dropped on Nagasaki, and everything after was a plutonium. Hiroshima was the only uranium bomb. Please wipe your feet. That's where they... that's actually child abuse, to bring your children to ground zero of a nuclear bomb. This was where Robert Oppenheimer hung out during the first detonation, apparently. And this is they're moving the jumbo to the Trinity site. There's actually one tractor there you can't see because I had to shorten the picture up. Let me go back here. Oh yeah, there you go. They're using big bulldozers, rather. And look at all the wheels, all the axles under the bomb. That's beautiful engineering for a horrible thing, but it's amazing engineering. Visitors to the Trinity site. You're only allowed to go there once a year or something. I think they take people out. People go in there. Don't quote me. There's one of these places where they allow them once a year to go to. I'm not sure if that's the one. Because it's so radioactive. You can only go there once a year. In other words, you're not supposed to go there, period. And the world's first atomic bomb was detonated on the 16th of July, 45 at the Trinity site. It's the only existing color shot of the Trinity test, taken by an amateur. And like, it's hard to wrap your mind around that nuclear bombs is a nuclear war. That's a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout. It doesn't have to blow up your city to be effective worldwide. And if you look at the Soviet Union's biggest bomb, was equal to 3,800 at Nagasaki, because it's a plutonium bomb. It was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. The animosity equivalent in radioactive fallout. It was equal to two countries firing 1,900 15, 20 kiloton Nagasaki bombs at each other or at the same spot. That's a war. So when you say there's only a couple of thousand nuclear weapons, some of these weapons are equal to double that. Because the 2,000 nuclear weapons, not many of them were the same. And many of them were megatons. And a megaton is 1,000 Hiroshimas, 1,000 Nagasakis. I think it worked out to 36,000 Hiroshima bombs going off on the planet. Don't quote me on that, of course. Because we've done the math here, not that long ago, probably a month ago or something. Three stocks will benefit from the nuclear arms race. I can barely wrap my mind around that story, that's an actual story. That somebody had to sit there and write that story. And this is the headline they put there. 3 stocks will benefit from the nuclear arms race. There should be no stocks for a nuclear arms race, and anybody who buys into the stocks should be sent to Fukushima, shouldn't they? And of course, the biggest stocks were Lockheed Martin, was Boeing, and Northrop Grumman. I think Northrop Grumman was the biggest one. And a buy rating for Northrop Grumman, which is a military-industrial complex. And quite often, it supplies weapons to both sides of the war. And Tokyo Bob gone crazy. Tokyo Charlie called me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more times after I blocked him. Calm down, Charlie. Russia's war has stalled a next-generation U.S. nuclear reactor backed by Bill Gates. Russia's war has stalled. Well, originally they had an embargo. 195 countries, UN countries, put embargoes against a country that they couldn't replace the commodities from, like gas, oil, coal, and nuclear. But they didn't have an embargo, sanctions on nuclear originally. That's just recent. And so that was the worst thing you can do. You didn't have any way of replacing it. Russia's just going to sell it to somebody else. So the only country you're going to punish is the United Nations countries, because United Nations is not supposed to exist. There was no referendum in any of the 195 countries. United Nations said, all of you countries put an embargo. We'll tell you what to do tomorrow when you wake up. We'll send memos out again every day for the rest of your life. So Bill Gates, of course, never ever went to TerraPower. The Wyoming mining site is not even due to shut down till late 2025. They can't start building on the site like they're claiming they were doing or gonna do, and media claim they're actually doing, which they're not, until after the mine is shut down, after it's decommissioned, which is going to take several years. It's about propaganda. The sole supplier, because that highly enriched mixed oxide fuel, 15, 16% like that, weapons military grade, is very difficult to create just normal mixed oxide fuel. So they're going to create highly enriched uranium, and then they're going to down blend it to make very, very energetic fuel rods for small modular reactors, and that's the trick. It'd be better if you took all the nuclear scientists, put them on a hamster wheel, hook it up to a generator. That's a better idea. And just whip them like they used to do with horses, which was terrible when you think about it. But a horse, horses kick each other, so they can take quite a beating. If you kick you, it'll kill you. But if you kick each other, they just get angry and kick back. And you might do that for hours. Owner revives a bid to reopen. Now this is the new owner, Chris Singh. The Holtec bought it to decommission it, but now that they got it, are they able, if the non-regulatory agencies goes along, but are they able to reopen it under the current Holtec Chris Singh, who's the janitor, the president, the secretary, the treasurer, front desk? He's everything. He does all the jobs. Zelensky says FIFA blocked peace message before the World Cup final. Well, the sports is supposed to be not your personal megaphone, right? Zelensky has sat cyberly in all parliaments, Western democracies, all United Nations parliaments worldwide at some point or another in the last 9 months. He's got every NATO country throwing weapons, money, and equipment, and resources, and money, and equipment, and money, and more money at him. And he wants everybody to fight the war so he can say he won the war. But remember, he imprisoned all of his opposing parties about 4 months before the war. Remember, he would rather, and he said this himself, he'd rather see the entire country flattened than surrender. I made a video originally, and it was, should Zelensky surrender? Has anybody ever surrendered in all the wars? No. In the current, the current last, since the Gulf Wars and the curb stomping and the annihilation of Iraq and Afghanistan, millions dead, millions missing, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans to get 10,000 Taliban. And then they went over to Iraq, millions dead, millions missing, millions unaccounted for, millions and millions of orphans. They got rid of the pensions and the patents of the country to get the rest of the 10,000 Taliban, who then went to Syria. So they went over and flattened that, and millions dead, millions missing, millions unaccounted for. To get the remainder, several hundred of the Taliban. 100 of them went over to India, so they done 20,000 drone strikes over there at every wedding party they ever had in the mountains. And then 100 of them call themselves ISIL. And then 100 of those went over to Africa and called themselves the Boko Haram, where there's millions dead, millions missing, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans, to get the 10,000 morphed from Taliban and ISIL. And Taliban came from the Mujahideen, who Russia spent 10 years in Afghanistan with millions dead, millions missing, millions unaccounted for, to get to 10,000 Mujahideen. 10,000 Hamas that went into Gaza. Israel can kill everything there except for Hamas for some reason. No problem killing the children, but can't seem to kill a single Hamas. Because then there's 10,000 of them. It's scary. I know, I hear you. We need a world without wars and invasions and stock markets and nuclear. Absolutely. Kissinger blasted Ukraine officials for pushing ceasefire for Russia. Well, they wanted to give up a chunk of their land, but that's not going to work. How's that going to work? They're still surrounded by NATO countries. NATO is not supposed to exist. They were created because of Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union was dissolved all their pensions to the lowlifes, the cowards, instead of letting someone fix it, then NATO should have been dissolved. But NATO, of course, controlled by America, is a perfect agent provocateur, right? Green Party statement on energy shutdown at Point Lepreau nuclear power station. That's probably why I'm censored tonight. Look at that. Tokyo Bureau Charlie still calling me. And this is probably the most important story tonight, unfortunately. Green Party statement on emergency shutdown at Point Lepreau, which I'm going to butcher because I'm terrible with anything that sounds French. Nuclear power station. On December the 14th, another costly power outage occurred at New Brunswick Point Lepreau nuclear power station on the beautiful Bay of Fundy, the beautiful radioactive Bay of Fundy. The fuel pools at this place are hemorrhaging radiation, still splitting the atoms into the environment. It's boiling off about 120,000 liters a day into the environment. Each liter is trillions of isotopes because the fuel reactor cores are put in a pool, and the pool soaks up the atoms, and the water boils off about 120 tons, 120,000 liters a day into the environment every day. This is saturated with radiation. And the Bay of Fundy, I dove the Bay of Fundy. It's equivalent to skydiving because the currents are so fast. And I had to give it up. I couldn't dive the coastline. It was just madness. The only thing you could do was go down and hide behind a rock or boulders. And if there's nothing there, you were screwed. And to come back up, you might travel a quarter mile, half a mile before you breach the surface because of the currents. You had a 50-foot tide exchange every 5 hours or something. It's absurd tide exchange there. Okay, let's get into it. So they had another event there. They covered up, forcing costly, potentially dangerous emergency shutdown at the reactor. Once Canadian Greens urged caution on the government's financing new nuclear experiments, dubbed small modular reactors, because that's what they are, and include two projects taking place where the AERC-100 and the Moltex, these are both going to be mixed oxide fuel. And they want to take the Canadian 5.5 million fuel assemblies and turn it into mixed oxide fuel, which is illegal in Canada, by the way, and the United States for that matter. And the United States, the Sam Bristol just changed a bunch of laws over the last 4 or 5 years. They're trying to make it legal, and he did for one of the laboratories, the national laboratories. But in Canada, it's still illegal as far as I know. So Moltex was created. The government in New Brunswick started up a subsidy company, like a normal company me or you would start up, and then they put in $10 million. There was two of these companies. One of them was a British company known as Moltex, and they got $5 million. The other company, I can't remember the name top of my head, got $5 million, and then they closed the company. So the company was started up to illegally give the nuclear industry this money, and these companies' reputation is just terrible reputation. Moltex wanting to change the laws to make mixed oxide fuel, which is absurd amount of pollution. You can't contain the pollution. And you're basically boiling the fuel rods in 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures in acid to separate the uranium and the plutonium, the hot particles that they want to aggregate. Coalition for Responsible Energy Development New Brunswick has requested Environment Climate Change Minister designate the ARC 100 small modular reactor experiment for review under the Impact Assessment Act. Now, one of these people I called up a couple of weeks ago to do an interview, I didn't realize that they were an ex-politician. But they're hooked up with that really extreme group in Britain that's now in Canada. What the hell is it? Extinction Rebellion? These are violent thugs. But apparently I'm too low of a life to come on my show. But they got no problem listing Extinction Rebellion on their site and as one of their acting members. Talk about disproportionately stupid. The Greens are demanding no new nuclear installations be exempt from a federal IA, which is an assessment, environmental impact assessments. Yet most of the small modular reactor designs currently listed with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission will likely be exempt from scrutiny. You'll be able to put these reactors right in your communities. And as they admit already, because of the licensing for the small modular reactors were finally finalized and published by the non-regulatory agency, the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, is that they got to keep it as low as reasonably possible in the emissions of radiation. And they're all like, well, we can't build it if we can't release radiation into the environment. In other words, they're going to be releasing lots of radiation in the environment. And having rules that's as low as reasonably achievable is not going to work for them because they're going to release a lot. So it's a very dangerous, a very harmful, a very deceitful and dishonest and disingenuous organizations, particularly the small modular reactor, but certainly the legacy of the nuclear industry is absolutely stunning. The recent past Green Party of Canada candidate Anne McAllister, who I called and talked to and got the nose from her right away, right? But on her site, she has listed Extinction Rebellion. These are violent thugs. 100% violent, vicious thugs. They've been to jail way more than I have. They've been arrested way more than I have. They get arrested all the time. I get arrested for coming in from research expeditions, and they needed to shut me up and gave me gag orders. You know, I'm still not healthy. What they done to me was just absurd. And then they hit me with a slap suit in order to basically bankrupt me. Dragged me into different jurisdictions over and over and over and over and over. I couldn't get a lawyer. 16 lawyers wouldn't touch my case. I never seen nothing like it. Never heard nothing like it. What they done to me was just disgusting, despicable. And when you pick a fight with me, it's forever, by the way. And I probably wouldn't be here today if they didn't do that to me, by the way. And they pissed me off. And if they're doing that to me, what are they doing to the other people that can't even defend themselves, was my first response. And so I said, well, I'll give you a reason to pick on me from here on out. I'll get better every single day at what I do. And I will do it every single day that I can. Given that the ARC small modular reactors has a sodium coolant, meaning its waste will become a new class, a highly radioactive and corrosive waste, highly radioactive, lethally radioactive, which is in the impacted existing radioactive waste storage plants. They can't contain low-level waste. Everything is vented into the environment and is catastrophic for the 8 million species. A second experimental design proposed by Moltex Energy raises nuclear proliferation concerns because it proposed to extract plutonium from used nuclear fuel. Well, we know they're not going to make nuclear weapons out of it. But the process that they're extracting it is extremely pollutive, right? So if you look at Durnford and Windscale and in the United Kingdom, or you look at La Hague in France, you look at studies of them, we've done presentations on just those studies, it pollutes everything for hundreds of thousands of square miles. It's consistently a disease factory all day, every day. and for millenniums, for millions of years after, because it never goes away. It's despicable. Right? The idea of it was they're not going to try to come up with a repository. We're just going to reprocess and stick it in the reactor again. So whatever you put in the reactor is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison after it comes out of the reactor, the emissions. And its emissions is constant. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. That's as bad as it gets. We don't have anything else in human history that we can compare it to for evilness. It's a catastrophic event for everything with replicating cells, and particularly humans, and particularly children. It's the scourge of the future of humanity. You can't have a future. You can't have species, as our research expeditions clearly show. That process was informally banned after India detonated a nuclear weapon in 1974 based on technology and material from Canada. Well, Canada was captured by the nuclear industry in the 70s. And after Fukushima, 55 countries banned the food from 14 prefectures. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. So Japan couldn't ship the food anywhere, only to Canada. So the most radioactive years, that food was shipped to Canada. And that's why majority Canadians are sick. Because there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses will show up before cancer. Cancer is latent. Wow, we got 21 people on our show. I'm just overwhelmed. That's some serious censorship tonight. What the hell is that all about, I wonder? Well, they got no one to pick on, right? Reprocessing requires liquefaction of the solid used fuel for the CANDU reactors used in Canadian disease factories. And as a result, new nuclear waste streams of higher toxicity will be generated. Yeah, because of this, like the sodium, one of the sodiums that melted down was Santa Susana. That released 460 times the amount that 3 Mile Island released, and never got no publicity hardly at all. In fact, he hid it away for about 50 years. It happened in 1959. And just because he hid it away don't mean it didn't harm hundreds of millions of people. You know, after 3 Mile Island, they admitted that around 2 million people got a radiation dose. He said 2 million people got a dose, but it's only equal to watching color television for an extra year. And, of course, this is simply, they got nothing to do with each other. A TV, of course, back then was brutal, but it's not on the same level as... Because when you get radiation in your body, your body attacks every atom. If you get thousands of atoms, it's like having thousands of cuts. Your body attacks each of them white blood cells, but instead of cuts that heal up, these don't heal. So your body attacks the radiation in your body, the atoms in your body, the man-made anthropogenic atoms, every second for the rest of your life. So that's a cause and effect. And what that means is, though, is that for every atom in your body that's under siege from white blood cells, in order for the white blood cells to exist, it has to displace red blood cells that carries oxygen and nutrition. So you have less oxygen and nutrition, and you become lethargic. You don't have energy. You can't think clearly. The list goes on and on and on. Your immune system is compromised. You're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses and illnesses and diseases that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. Don't worry, I'm only going to tell you 500 more times before 2022 is out. You'll figure it out. Other next generation nuclear experiments are planned for Chalk River. Chalk River had a nuclear meltdown in 1955, and a few years ago they poured grout over it. It's still hemorrhaging into the environment that whole time, and it always will be. And every time it rains and snows, it's right alongside of a river that takes it to Ottawa, but also through the Great Lakes. The biggest aquifers in the Northern Hemisphere is highly polluted from decades and decades of Chalk River. And the Americans got nuclear power plants on these Great Lakes, and so is Canada. They're like, if you want to think of the worst thing you could do, that's it. France is a shining example again, but not as bad as what Canada done. Uranium mines and their tailings lakes pollutes our precious north for millenniums to come, impacting First Nations, Metis, and Inuit communities who have not been adequately consulted. Everybody, nobody escapes this stuff, particularly the Earth. Greens are using the Canadian media and the public to look into investigate these new nuclear experiments. The companies behind these experiments are often nuclear weapons producers. Now, they don't have a reactor. So the Green Party is way ahead on this. We've never seen any examples of this either, where they're way ahead. They don't have any plans into the regulatory agencies. They don't have, the million pieces of paper for the designs into the regulatory agency to scrutinize. And then, if you find any flaws, then they got to re-engineer that. Doug Ford broke ground in Ontario for a small modular reactor. I think it was the Pickering site or the Darlington site. I covered that when that story came out. They got $25 million to screw with, but they don't got no designs. They don't got no reactors. So they weren't breaking ground for the reactor. They claimed what they were doing was hooking up power to the site, making road access to the site, and bringing water to the site, which had it anyway because it's a nuclear power plant, and it didn't need any permits per se that they couldn't easily obtain because they're already a nuclear power site. It was just song and dance. They got some free money. Somebody got a bunch of money to play with. A bunch of people got a job for something that's not going to come to fruition because the renewable industry, particularly geothermal can replace all of this anywhere on the planet. And you say, oh, Daniel, well, you can only drill down so deep. That's not true anymore. We have lasers. We can evaporate the rocks and dig down as deep as we want. And if we put a couple of universities to work on that part of the solution, the rest of it is already solved. The infrastructure is easy. We can have it up and running in 12 months instead of 12 years. And it'll run for 1 million years. You can just build another geothermal plant alongside the one you want to replace. When it's ready, turn it on, turn off the other one. There's no harmful pollutions. There's no emissions. It's the perfect solution, but it's been suppressed like storage. A nuclear critic for the Green Party of Canada. And it's unusual, but they've done a great job on flushing out the story. They don't know that this is a complicated subject. And so I thought they'd done a great job on the story. You missed a lot of critical points, obviously. And that's to be expected because this is a complicated subject. And if you're going to tell a story, you kind of want to tell the most important facets of the story, but most people have no concept of what that actually means because the industry is very, very vague, right? The biggest problem is that the spent fuel worldwide and all the pools is still splitting the atoms into the environment. So when people talk about, you can't solve your high-level waste problem, nobody understands what the frig that means. Like, they can't. I don't know what that means. Well, a high-level waste is splitting the same atoms it was for millions of homes with no containment. Instead of being in a containment, once you take it to the containment, it's still splitting the same atoms. They're released all day. You're adding, bioaccumulating it into the environment and all the species. It never goes away. It's pulsing energy. Everything is pulsing energy. All these atoms you're releasing, these invisible snowstorms. You can't see it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. Does that mean it doesn't exist? Does that mean it's not harmful? So there was a few stories showed up. And none of the stories showed up till days later. A power loss showed unreliability and antiquity of nuclear. So apparently the Green Party vehemently anti-nuclear. Bless their hearts. Atlantic Canada's only nuclear power plant is offline due to partial power loss. They all run on external power. They all need 2 dedicated gas oil coal plants. So anybody calls them carbon-free doesn't understand the big picture. By the way, you can't have any species without carbon. If no carbon, the planet would be completely naked. And nuclear kills the bacteria and the fungus in your ground and your forest. So that's why your forest fires are so wicked, because the forest is not breaking down anymore. So the foliage and the leaf and the litter, when you get a lightning strike, causes huge fires because the forests don't break down. And since about 4 years after Fukushima, we pretty well destroyed it. And then the forests don't soak up water because it doesn't have bacteria and fungus to create the ecosystem, right? All the little creatures necessary to break down the foliage and everything else. The cycle of life is broken. And we're seeing it, of course, with all the emaciated birds, emaciated whales, emaciated animals. I noticed this year they went hardcore. By the beginning of summer, they started trying to blame everything on bird flu. And it jumped all these species, raccoons and foxes. And there was like 2 weeks where they came out with all these stories. They stopped after 2 weeks and never repeated any of those stories again. And this was obviously a coordinated propaganda. We done the research in April of the die-offs here on the East Coast. Those birds were all emaciated, and there was no bird flu. They had starved to death. They tried to blame it on ice pack, but there was no ice pack because we went down and done the coastline, visually seen it ourselves. So the most recent shutdown was last August. They've had a lot of shutdowns. They've done a $2 billion rebuild on this facility, and it's still having massive issues. And of course, that's always true after they spend big money on these. A lot of money is stolen. About 90% of it goes to administration. Only 10% of it goes into actual infrastructure. So they're losing about, $1 million plus a day, 1.2 million a day or something. These plants are losing, right? And the nuclear industry will sacrifice the entire East Coast to get that plant back up and running, to murder the rest of the species that are barely hanging on. They don't have a date for the reconnection. So, this is all suggesting there's something big going on, but they covered it up. And remember, we fought that last year, or earlier this year, they got a 10-year extension on this old and decrepit facility, on top of that, that's bombarded with neutrons for decades. And they asked for a 25-year renewal or extension on the plant without it's absurd. The chief of the local area details concerns about the radioactive waste from the nuclear reactor. Reactors are hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day into your communities. There's currently no long-term storage plant for waste from the power plants because it's still splitting the atoms into the environment. You're talking invisible snowstorms covering and continuous plumes covering the entire planet from these fuel pools. They're hemorrhaging. And anything within 30, 40 miles is getting brutalized. And they're shipping in radioactive food from Fukushima, which is why we got the stalker calling in earlier. The thing is, they've always sold it as a reliable source of base load power. And that's because they never ever created an alternative, which is another trick the industry does, where they know their nuclear plants are getting old. They know they should be replaced, but they don't replace it. And so they say, well, we can't turn it off. We got nothing to replace it. And you say, well, the ratepayers paid the extra money so you can build a new place, something more friendly. But they know they can't build a new nuclear power plant, so they keep the old decrepit ones as long as they can, because they produce the most isotopes into the environment. Because the older they are, the more fuel you got, the more radiation is released all day, every day. And so the local communities and farms and aquifers are unbelievably polluted. So there was 3 or 4 stories. New Brunswick Power has not identified, that doesn't mean there's none there, it just hasn't identified any radiation contamination or spills into the environment, right? That's a really deceptive way to make a statement. Has not identified. In other words, if something shows up, they say, well, we didn't find it yet. And these are big sites. It's funny how after an earthquake, within 1 hour, nuclear plants will say everything is fine, despite the fact they're usually like a square mile, and it's impossible to quantify that kind of assertion in that period of time. So the Commission mandates include protecting the health, safety, security, and the environment. They're the very last ones you want to trust in an accident. That should terrify you. They're the very opposite of somebody you want to trust when there's an accident. Yeah. So they've done 2.4 billion refurbishment in 2012, and they've been down for 8,000 hours since then. 8,000 plus, which is almost a whole year, which is absurd, really. And they're constantly having to shut down to do repairs. Cost unknown as New Brunswick Power deals with breakdown at 2 key generating stations. So they also had 2 key generating stations that broke down. And they've been hinting that a fix would not be immediate. So the same company has a pretty terrible record that would seem to me complacent wouldn't really cover how a proper word for what they're doing. It's criminal what they're actually doing. It should never have got an extension, see? It was already having its worst year of production since coming out of a major refurbishment a decade ago. An April maintenance outage, the New Brunswick Power had hoped to keep to 10 weeks, dragged on for 17 weeks, as more issues than expected, which, like, if you really inspected it, you wouldn't be able to open it back up. Catastrophic breakdowns last winter from other facilities. Anyway. I'll just call it a night right there, maybe. We'll pick back up tomorrow night. We'll pick back up tomorrow night. Practically nobody on the show tonight. What's going on with that? I don't know. I got no idea. Let's bring up the poll before we close that down. Should nuclear scientists be held accountable for never trying to stop Fukushima's radioactive fallout? We have 43 votes, an overwhelming 95% of people who said yes, they should be held accountable. They should lose their degrees and go to prison for the rest of their lives. That's my opinion, anyway. Colette S. donated $75 last night. Colette, thank you, honey. We appreciate that. We're going to end the poll on 95%. And because we got censored big time tonight. Thank you, Dana, for moderating. Hope it all went well. James Lucis sent a PayPal. Thank you, James. You're amazing, man. Thank you. It's amazing. We got a show almost ready to go for tomorrow night. Well, it's half. We'll get a lot of it done after the show tonight and the rest tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon. Blue Jay, everybody, good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Hope everybody has a great night, a great day tomorrow. I'm not going to try to get through the comments tonight. My eyesight's a little fuzzy tonight. I poked myself in the eye just before I went live. I thought I scratched my eyeball for about 5 or 10 seconds. Poked it with a spoon handle. I was making a cup of tea and I went to scratch my face and popped myself right in the eye. So if you see me blinking a lot tonight, you know what's going on. We'll see everybody. Vast Thinker, good night. Good night to everybody. Stephen Young I seen here earlier. Maybe we'll do a shout out where I'm started. Albert, let me come down. Yeah, Merry Christmas, Stephen Young. Thank you, my friend. The Invisible Rabbit, James Megan. I'll just come down not quickly, but I'll just shoot down and say good night. Christopher Liebert, Richard. Yeah, I got some serious Angel's Place is out there, I'm sure. Thirst, Gmail. Yeah, no, I can't give Tokyo Charlie a venue here because he said some pretty terrifying things to me over the years. He used to call me about 40 times a day. Provoke, and that's referring to the caller from Tokyo Bureau in the United States, allegedly. He's a terrible person, that guy. And thank goodness we had great callers tonight. Michael Roos. And Savannah Fort. Yeah, I'm definitely having problems with my eyes. One of them's not that good anyway. Soda Spock. Let's finish it up anyway. James Ward. And Dana Nasana, of course. Fast Thinker said hi. Blue Jay Outpost said hi. Looks like I got everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Be careful out there. The traffic's mad. It's absolutely mad this time of the year. Please drive careful. There's a lot of people out there who hasn't got their minds on the road. And a lot of pedestrians are making stupid moves trying to take on multi-ton vehicles at high speeds. And just always look before you cross the road, folks. Take care, have a great night, and we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hopefully more than 20 shows up. Yeah, you can't win them all. The nuclear industry will make sure of that. Good night, folks. Take care. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. That's appreciated. Good night, everybody.